And so why is evil so rampant today? Why is it so rampant in Canada? Why is it so rampant in the United States? Why is it so rampant around the world? It's not that hearts have become more evil. Hearts have always been evil. Just read the book of Genesis. And just read about the pre-flood civilization, when God just had to drown the entire world, except for 8 people. Read about Sodom and Gomorrah in the book of Genesis. No, it's not that now suddenly people have become more evil. The reason why it is so prominent in the world today is because the salt has become tasteless. The salt has lost its purity. The salt has lost its moral courage. The salt has lost its will to stand. The salt has lost its convictions. The salt is no longer anchored to the faith once and for all delivered to the saints, because the church has toned down her message to accommodate so-called seekers and softened her witness to the truth. No, the church has lost its saltiness. Christians have lost their saltiness. And so what is the result of this? He says, how can it be made salty again? He's not saying that a disciple could lose his salvation, and how could he be now born again? How can it be made salty? How can it regain its strength, its power, its pungency, its saltiness? How can the church be the church that it once was? Well, the church must come back to the gold standard of the Word of God. We look down the page at verse 19, Matthew 5, verse 19. Jesus will go on to say, whoever then annuls one of the least of these commandments, that means to marginalize the holiness of God, and to marginalize the holy law of God, and to marginalize the holy standard that is set forth in the Word of God. Whoever then annuls one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. Everyone's not on the same plane in heaven or in the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven is not run by socialism, where everybody gets the same. No, there are some who are great in the kingdom of heaven, and there are some who are, quite frankly, losers in the kingdom of heaven, and who are least in the kingdom of heaven. Verse 19 goes on to say, but whoever keeps and teaches, keeps means obey, and teaches, proclaims them, referring to these commandments, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. If the salt loses its saltiness, if the salt becomes tasteless, if the church in Canada becomes tasteless, if the believers in this conference become tasteless, he says at the end of verse 13, it is no longer good for anything. No longer any spiritual good. No longer any eternal good. No longer any gospel good. It is no longer good for anything. How these words must have had some shock value when Jesus first preached this in the Sermon on the Mount. Good for nothing. And then he says, except, this is what you're good for. If you've become tasteless, except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. I mean, these are alarming words. These words are a wake-up call to the church in the United States, to the church in Canada. To be thrown out does not mean that you lose your salvation. It means you've lost your witness. You've lost your influence. You've lost your power. And you're not good for anything, according to Jesus, except to be discarded because you're just kind of in the way. Except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. And the men here are the men of the world. And the unbelievers then have scorn for the church. They've lost any respect for the church. It's just trampled underfoot with an air of mockery because the church is no longer the church that it should be.